The group made Sultan Chives. Yeah,
Oh,
Chives.
we're gonna have very different pronunciation of stuff, okay?
I weep.
Doesn't matter.
Polish is a freaking enigma to me. Okay. Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Eau Claire, a Global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from Good Morn, and I'll be your host as you, I, and our international Hansa accompany Geralt of Rivia into his destiny, Cyrilla of Sintra, across the continent. Hope you all had a lovely, happy, and safe new year, and a great first day to 2025. Can't wait to see what new things in the Witcher world we have to look forward to. This episode, we welcome Prisa and Jimmy to our Hansa on Patreon. Thank you so much to our patrons and our producer-level patrons, Katie the Redhead of Dusant, Jacob B. Sharp from Eggenberg Glamorai, the original Roach, Libby, John of Riblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Miriam of Temeria, Softy, Lisa C., and Red Kite. If you would like to learn more about supporting Breakfast in Beauclair, visit patreon.com/breakfast in Beauclair. As for this episode, Bolo from Poland and Sophie from Morocco call in for Andrzej Sapkowski's Baptism of Fire, Chapter 2. Join us as we examine various aspects of war, judge Geralt's actions as admirable or reckless, and discuss inverting circumstances for the next phase of life, Sapkowski's masterful dialogue, doing specific good, the enjoyable parade of nothing really happening, and the big pile of poop jokes we missed. Without further ado, let's get to our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Baptism of Fire, Chapter 2. Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair. My name is Alyssa, and today we're welcoming two members of our Hansa to the show. My first guest was our wonderful host for this year's Hansa meetup in Krakow, Poland. He's at least 6 Alyssas tall, works in IT, and spends his time picking up and putting down big weights. My second guest is a web designer and webmaster from Morocco who loves playing video games in her spare time. Please welcome Bolo from Poland and Sophie from Morocco. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi, guys.
Hello. It is so lovely to have you both on. Bolo, it's so nice to see you again after our time in Poland. And Sophie, it's lovely to meet you. I'm excited to introduce both of you to our community and to our listeners. So as first-time guests of the show, would you guys be able to tell us how you first got into The Witcher?
Ladies first, right?
Yeah.
The first time I stumbled into the world of The Witcher, it was through the game, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. And I just bought it and I didn't know anything about the Witcher world. I didn't download the game until a very long time. And then when I started playing it, I just discovered that there is so much lore behind it. And then I learned about the books and I bought the books and I read them. And they're absolutely beautiful. And then I watched the series on Netflix, and that's actually how I found your podcast.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it's so lovely to hear that, like, you've also kind of walked the same path that most of us have in finding The Witcher 3 and then finding the books and then watching the Netflix show. Yeah, really excited to hear your perspective as we dive into the chapter 2. Bolo, what about you? As a Polish native,
Yeah, I did not want the same path.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the Witcher books, like as they were coming out, my father and my uncle, they were just buying them straight up. And they were always discussing them among themselves. And I was too young to read them because I was 7 at the time that they started coming out, I believe. So when I was 12, I finally got the privilege to read the books. I read them 20 odd times since, just getting like from start to finish, not counting
Yeah.
the particular books without the order. Yeah, I got my first PC so I can play The Witcher 1, and I got my first laptop so I can play The Witcher 3. So yeah, it's been a huge part of my life, or better part of my life, actually.
Yeah. Amazing. And I know that one of the things that we've discussed has been the difference in translations between, of course, the original Polish, which you have the lovely privilege of reading,
Yes.
and English and other translations. Any high level call outs before we get into the details of the chapter?
Yes, you guys cannot swear. Save your lives.
Mhm.
I have been told that by Anita and Carolina many, many, many
Yes.
times.
That is like one of the things. The other thing is you can in Polish you can see the difference between people talking in the book. Like Milva uses different words, like whole
Mm,
words or sentence structures, different the Geralt, for example, or Jaskier, or the dwarfs for that matter. People that we have in this chapter, right? And you are absolutely unable to mix between those in English. Yes, you are.
mhm.
Really, just a wandering fuck will be the difference between the dwarf talking and some other person talking.
Yeah.
And there are some other stuff like weird changes of words without purpose
Mhm.
or actively hurting world building. Like, no, Sihil is not in deer wrapping, it's in cat fur wrapping. No, Yasker did not eat sardines, he ate stockfish. It's a very different thing. You don't have canned sardines in the middle of the land far from the sea.
Okay.
Weird choices. That's all I'm going to say. But I will say that the translation in the baptism of fire or like sword of destiny for that matter is much better than the translation in the last wish.
Mm,
It is very evident that it was not a native speaker that was translating it, because
mm.
that was a Polish girl translating, I believe, into English, which like you can see that some idioms are missing,
Gotcha.
like phrases and stuff. And again, on the other side is like, yeah, you're lacking context, you're lacking that oomph that Sapkowski brings. I will not go as far as to say that it's unreadable, but it's much less enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, lots of exciting stuff for you to then share with us
Yeah.
today. As somebody who still enjoys poor translations, I'm excited to hear more from you about what we're missing out on. Before we dive into the discussion, Sophie, you are a lover of video games. Bolo, I believe you are as well. Do you guys have any recommendations for new games that listeners of Breakfast in Beauclair might enjoy if they like The Witcher?
I lately started playing the remastered version of Tomb Raider.
Oh.
Well, I bought the three games. It's the first, second, and third, and they're pretty good. I mean, the remastered version, it's not modern.
Mhm.
It's not like the new games, so you're gonna need a lot of patience. But I like the puzzles, I like the atmosphere, and I love Lara Croft. She's actually one of my favorite video games characters.
Bolo, what about you?
I mean, recently I've been playing a lot of Elden Ring, and I'm playing it as if it was a Witcher, really. I
Mhm.
just have a sword. I don't understand the rest of the mechanics, and I'm just rolling around. It's quite enjoyable, unless it melts your brain because you're fighting the same stuff all over again. So yeah, if you enjoyed the fight with the frog in the Hearts of the Stone, by the way, the best DLC ever, ever.
Yeah, I love it.
Then yeah, you will enjoy the Elden Ring. If you did not, don't do it to yourself.
That sounds like a perfect word of caution. It's been very lovely getting to know you both, and I'm excited to dive into the chapter. So today we'll continue our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Baptism of Fire with Chapter 2, in which Geralt, Dandelion, and Milva find Cahir at a prisoner exchange. The group meets Zoltan Shive's band of dwarves, and together they face a monster and marauders. Here's a quick synopsis of the episode from future Alyssa. In Chapter 2 of Baptism of Fire, Geralt, Dandelion, and Milva find themselves navigating the chaos of war as they continue their journey south toward Nilfgaard, chasing rumors that Ciri is there. As they seek shelter from the rain, Geralt and Dandelion encounter a hawker who mistakes them for elves. Before long, Nilfgaardian soldiers arrive for a prisoner exchange. Things take a violent turn, and after a brief skirmish, the group discovers that the prisoner in question is none other than Cahir, the Nilfgaardian knight who tried to abduct Ciri unfanted. Milva's skeptical that he succeeded if he's a prisoner now. The group leave him to fend for himself and take off into the trees. Cahir later reappears asking to join their group, but Geralt and Milva refuse and send him away. The trio witnesses the brutality of war firsthand, watching a battle unfold between Verdun and Brugge forces, with Nilfgaardian and Scoia'tael reinforcements eventually overwhelming the defenders. Despite the grim realities around them, Geralt remains determined to reach Nilfgaard, and Milva agrees to guide them to the Yaruga. Along the way, Geralt becomes increasingly irritable, especially as Dandelion and Milva question Ciri's fate. He reveals he's been having recurring dreams in which Ciri rides with bandits, leaving death in her wake. On the road, they abruptly encounter Zoltan Shiva and his eclectic band of dwarves, refugees, and their talkative parrot, Field Marshal Windbag. The larger company lifts their spirits and makes the journey more bearable. However, the company faces more violence when they witness marauders raid a small settlement and attack a young woman. Geralt, Milva, and Zoltan kill all of the attackers. In a surprising turn, Cahir reappears, saving the group by killing one of the marauders, but his presence raises more questions about his true intentions. So now that we've gotten an overview of the chapter from future Alyssa, I'd love to hear a little bit from you guys about what were overall thoughts on the chapter and some of your highlights and lowlights before we get into the discussion questions.
Baptism of Fire actually is my favorite book.
Yeah.
Yay!
It has great characters. I mean, Milva, Cahir. I just think it's funny how Geralt is dealing with all of these new people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a change. It's a new dynamic that we get to discover. And of course, Dandelion is just tagging along. It's just hilarious to me.
Yeah, I will second the notion of this being the best book. Like, not only my favorite, I will go on the record and say this is the best book out of all of them.
Yeah.
All 7, even if you want to include the Season of Storms. This is really the only part of the Witcher saga that is actually about Witcher. Because as much as we can talk about it is called Witcher Saga, these books are about Ciri, really.
Yeah.
Baptism of Fire is just back to this vibe, the road trip. Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
I think that this book in particular is about war, a family who is separated by war, you know?
Yes, as well. Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's a huge, huge theme and setting of the book. Yeah.
And it's very realistic. And you kind of forget about fantasy.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the themes we'll talk about as well. There's so much in this chapter, and a lot of it really does cover, I think, both of those things, like the idea of getting the band back together, contrasted with the realities and the inescapable setting of war on the continent. And that we'll get a chance to talk about that juxtaposition, throughout our discussion. But some of the scenes that stood out to me in this chapter, I really enjoyed some of the moments of levity and things like the dwarves playing barrel or like Geralt's and the eye had, because it feels very like low stakes. I think a lot of the things that they get up to in this chapter are actually quite light compared to what's happening in the landscape around them. It still made the progression of the chapter enjoyable, and we want to go on, as Bolo just said, this road trip with our main cast. Just to jump into our questions, how does the opening excerpt from Dandelion's half-century of poetry prime the reader for Chapter 2? Here it is in full. I have met many military men in my life. I've known marshals, generals, commanders, and governors, the victors of numerous campaigns and battles. I've listened to their stories and recollections. I've seen them poring over maps, drawing lines of various colors on them, making plans, thinking up strategies. In those paper wars, everything worked. Everything functioned, and everything was clear, and everything was in exemplary order. That's how it has to be, explained the military man. The arm represents discipline and order above all. The army cannot exist without discipline and order. So it's all the stranger that real wars, and I've seen several real wars, have as much in common with discipline and order as a whorehouse with a raging fire through it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Also very accurate.
Yeah. So what do you guys think about Sapkowski's inclusion of this excerpt and what it sets up for Chapter 2?
Like I said earlier, this is the part where it gets real in the books, and it's very accurate to real life. And I don't know about you guys, but I think that Sapkowski is using a lot of stories maybe from the Second World War.
Not only, but yes.
I think he's been very inspired by it.
Yeah.
And we can sense it through what you just read and many, many other parts in this book in particular, or this chapter.
Yeah, well, to put it into context, like not only Second World War, right? Like Poland was very active on the war fields and battlefield throughout like 17th and 18th century, mostly because everybody wanted a piece of it.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of stuff that you can see, and you can look at some of the battles and be like, yeah, I think if you map this one and that actual a historical battle, that will pretty much fill one by one. Like this will work here. I listened recently with Stepan and Cyprian. They actually also harped on it that Sapkowski is really just pulling out of history a lot, and he does.
Yeah.
And not only history, he also pulls a lot of stuff from literature. Specifically, if you look at Sienkiewicz's trilogy, it is there are many parallels that you can draw. A lot of times it is a homage.
Well, in the previous books, I noticed that Sapkowski makes a lot of references that are Polish, but as a foreigner, we don't really know that until we look for it, for example, in Reddit or Google in general or YouTube.
To be fair, he does that not only with Polish.
Yeah.
Like the best thing that I got from reading this in English, like a few days back, is actually the hookers. In Polish, they don't work. Like it is just implied that they have some predatory and nasty implications. Jastrząb and hawk is not really close between them. So I never made this connection, right? He just pulls stuff that he wants. It is not as obvious in this book. Like in his later works, it's even more problematic to understand what he has in mind, especially the Viper one, which is very work required. A lot of work is required for you to understand the book. And yeah, I can see how you can feel that way about this one, right? Like for me, the Polish stuff it just comes.
Just to come back to the text, what I enjoy about this is Dandelion talking about the separation from hypothetical war. We've spent a lot of chapter 1 with, this is only chapter 2, right? Yeah. We spent some of chapter 1 with the Lodge, with Dijkstra, and when they're talking about the things that happen on the continent, they're very removed from the realities of it. And like Dijkstra has, papers about like executions that are scheduled and all this other stuff. Philippa and the women of the Lodge, both in the North and Nilfgaard, talk about the concepts behind why war is being waged. But I think when we actually return to Geralt and Milva and Dandelion, there is a human cost for everything that the kings and the sorcerers are playing at. And we see that illustrated in detail here, which I think Sapkowski, as you said, Sophie, does a nice job of like making it pretty grounded. And we do forget about that fantastical element as we're with the trio and Zoltan.
Yeah, the matter of perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to say continually throughout this whole season as we discuss Baptism of Fire, the adage of old men wage war, but young men are sent to it. And yeah, we'll see that throughout the whole book. As we continue on, since Geralt's time on Thanedd, he has gotten a new injury, which we'll see him handle throughout the course of the next few books. What might Geralt's injury and new feelings of helplessness signal about this next stage of his story?
I think this is where Geralt stops being a witcher. He starts to be more humane, I think. Especially he loses his swords and he's injured and he's in a quest to look for Ciri and he's gaining new friends. He's never had this before.
Yeah.
We completely forget that he's a witcher and there are no monsters in this book, I think. There's just one.
Yeah.
There is a line by Dandelion when he says that people cease to be human, especially during war. So I think this is Sapkowski telling us that now the monsters are the people.
Yeah, which is also a huge part of the whole theme of the books, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And also Milva suggests that the company travels through the woods because she'd rather be in the company of monsters than humans. And it's a big theme in this book. And also, I don't know if we should talk about that moment when he saves the girl and then he becomes a knight.
I maybe don't entirely agree of him being the knight. He's doing that because he kind of thinks that serious. Like there's similarity that is passing when he's done killing the people. He is not gonna be saving lives left, right, and center. There's like more singular purpose to it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, he's no longer a Witcher, and that's gonna be there till Lady of the Lake. It is a thing. I never had such an injury, but it is very difficult to find yourself unable to do the things that you were doing prior
Mhm.
with amazing ease. And now this struggle really prevents you from doing what kept you alive for, in the Witcher case, for decades, which is the only thing that you can do. Like, I can see how that would induce some crisis of identity.
Yeah, and that crisis comes out in bursts of anger at his friends.
I mean, yeah, pretty much right for the course with his personality.
I think it's a mixture between his injury and him losing Siri, and he's also got this thing going on with Yennefer. He doesn't know what really happened. It's a whole mixture of things.
Yeah,
When it comes to the injury and then these new feelings of helplessness, I think, like both of you are saying, he has operated alone
yeah.
His whole
through,
life.
yeah, up until this point. And like he's used to a certain way of like living and working. And suddenly there's an instigating event where he now has a chronic injury. He has feelings of helplessness and despair that he hasn't had before because he hasn't really had anything on the line that way before. And so I think it's also a signal that his old ways of living and working aren't going to work the same as they did before. So he's going to have to adapt in some way.
Yeah.
He just struggles to accept that he's going to have to adapt.
Yeah, it's that thing of just like the next stage of his story is going to have to be an inverse of that independence to like finding a company and everything else that, goes along with that.
Which is a nice setup for the next chapter, right?
Yes,
With the
absolutely.
soup and stuff.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite part. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
I think it's a nice reminder that physically and mentally and emotionally, there is something new ahead for Geralt. How he handles that, we'll we'll see.
Poorly, it's
We'll
Geralt.
see for sure. And that leads us very nicely into our next question. So, Milva repeatedly expresses doubts about Geralt's plan to cross the Yaruga into Nilfgaard. Do you think Geralt's resolve is admirable or reckless, given the circumstances?
Yes.
And how do Milva and Geralt's opposing views shape their relationship?
I love Milva. She has a strong personality, and
Yeah.
He does.
and she is going toe to toe with him.
Mhm.
She's not someone who is shying away from speaking her mind, and she's telling him that he's crazy, that this adventure is impossible, and he is set in his ways.
I think that at the very start, at least, like Milva is a personification of the meme of, well, she's got a good spirit, but she's a bit out of the line, which really is what she's dealing with, right? Because, yeah, the quest to get Ciri from Nilfgaard is crazy, is absolutely bonkers.
Yeah,
Mhm.
That part, yeah, she got a good idea about that. Her idea of why are they going there is completely different story.
yeah. But it's completely valid because she doesn't know the story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And she gets to know it throughout this chapter,
Yeah,
which also sets up. And like there are some other stuff why she's tagging along,
yeah. I mean, she's going through her own thing.
Yeah.
which is also set up in this chapter. Like everything is like this chapter is just huge setup for
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
everything, bro.
It's 2 hours long in the audiobooks. It's huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff to set up, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, the dynamic is fantastic, and it doesn't stop. And the moments of levity with the hemorrhoids, however weird that sounds in a sentence, it's very much needed, right? Because we get to see her for what she is, and I'm gonna harp on it again. In Polish translation, it's so much better. Uh, because she has a separate mode of speaking. Like she is very blunt, she is very to the point, and it is also visible in her vocabulary, which
Mm.
isn't really the case in English. Uh, I'm gonna guess that in audiobook somebody made a nice accent for her that she sounds like she's that like that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah. It's very. I would not want to see a one-to-one translation. I'm not sure how good you are with like archaic words. Here in Poland, it's pretty usual to use them from time to time. It, I don't think that's the case there. Like,
Not as much in English, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And I've listened to the audiobooks by Peter Kenny, which is he's amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, he's the best. And he's given her a very thick accent, you know?
that's solid. She should have thick accent, like triple C's at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I do agree with both of you that I love their dynamic because they're practical in very, very, very different ways.
Yeah.
Like, Geralt has a practicality when I think it comes to the way that he assumes the world should be, but he's still on like this very ridiculous quest for his kid. Whereas Milva has been around the way the world is, and she is fighting on the front lines with the Scoia'tael. You know, she's fighting the humans, going on raids, and all of this stuff. And she has a very realistic sense of what the dynamic is in her immediate circle. Geralt, I think he has a certain belief in his abilities and that those abilities will be able to get him to the Yaruga and into
Yeah.
Nilfgaard.
About that.
Yeah, I know. And like he doesn't seem to have, again, reconciled with the fact that he is not the same Witcher. He's not the same person anymore. But I do enjoy the candor in the relationship and like how honest they become with each other. And I think that that platonic friendship is so central to the core of not only their story, but of Baptism of Fire as a whole. Were you going to say something, Bolo?
No. I was just, commenting on his ideas and stuff.
Yeah. When it comes to Geralt, I teeter between is this admirable or is this reckless? Like his pursuit of Ciri.
The answer is yes. Just yes. Not both, not yes.
I actually call it a suicide mission.
Yeah, it
that's
is. Yeah. It's full on kamikaze.
yeah. There's an admiration in his pursuit.
Yeah.
There is recklessness in
the method.
Yeah, in the method. I don't know. Like, I feel like I talk very candidly about how ridiculous I think Geralt is as a person. And we could talk about him being this, like, super stoic, hot, sexy macho man. And, like, is he?
I mean, that's the hot, sexy macho man. I will say this. It is maybe unpopular opinion, but if I was ever to cast someone as Geralt, that would actually fit the description in the books.
Yeah.
It's like Clint Eastwood from the days of Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
Because he's tall, he's sharp, lanky, and strong, and he is not the most handsome person in the world. And
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody in the world has as nasty smile as this dude had back then.
It's debatable.
Well, the smile? I don't think it's debatable.
No, about his good looks.
Yeah, see, that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
If you put Henry Cavill, he's the Superman level of Henry.
Oh, yeah.
If you put Clint Eastwood, he's like, yeah, that's out of the left field, but yes, sure.
So as we continue our conversation, how would you guys say Sapkowski's writing style contextualizes Geralt, Dandelion, and Milva's indifference toward the war during their journey? And what might it say about our own attention to modern wars and atrocities? One of the quotes from this chapter, there were other scenes of war, but Geralt, Dandelion, and Milva didn't remember them. They had discarded them from their memories. They'd become indifferent.
Yeah, that part was like really sad.
Why is that for you, Sophie?
I think it's because there is no point of getting a reaction of what they've been seeing. War is horrible. And what are they going to do? There's nothing else to do. It's not that they've become desensitized. It's not true. It's just that it's helpless.
I mean, I think that they do become desensitized because it's helpless. There's a clear way of them getting more and more indifferent. And honestly, after the scene in the tar factory, yeah, you would become indifferent probably to the, normal bad people by the side of the road after you saw people hacked with saws and axes to pieces, right?
Yeah.
when you can't really determine how many people is that in the place because they're just dismembered as much, like, yeah, you probably don't like cringe on somebody lying dead by the road or hanging from the tree. I don't think this translates well to current situations because the second part of it, right? Our own attention to the war and atrocities. We can be indifferent because it's far away, or we can be not indifferent even though it is far away, but we don't get to participate in it on the same level.
No. I might disagree with you there, though. I think with the advent of social media, a lot of the things that are happening now in present day, this is the first time that we're seeing like real time.
Yeah.
Yes, live stream.
So, yeah, like things are being live streamed. Like
Yeah,
there's drone footage of wars now, and
yeah,
it's different now because we're physically removed
Yeah.
yeah,
and it doesn't really impact our daily lives. But there is, I think, a level of desensitization when you're seeing these images over and over and over again. And there's new ways to, for example, quote unquote, contribute to war efforts when it comes to, donating money from overseas and that sort of thing. There's a level of separation, and there's also a level of being able to consume, I don't have a better word for it, unfortunately,
Yeah.
all of these images of war that we wouldn't have normally gotten, that would have taken, months to come out or years to come out during
yeah.
previous wars like Vietnam, that we're getting instantaneously in the modern era.
Yes, then again, I wouldn't say that this will desensitize us to actual, war being in our neighborhood. Like,
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
look, I live in Poland. We have Ukraine just outside the border. Like, there's a war there.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm pretty sure that if, God forbid, but if the war was to come here, like I'm gonna not be in a very stable position mentally or
Right.
in any other capacity when I see like dead people lying around, like bombardments and stuff. Like
Mhm.
it's not like, yes, it's getting you mentally prepared that this might happen, but it's not getting you mentally prepared to actually live through it. I don't believe so, at least.
I do think that's a good point too.
I think the part that you mentioned with Dandelion and Milva, it was before meeting the company of Zoltan, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was
Yeah.
before his Geralt's intervention to save the girl.
Oh, that's the end of the chapter. So yeah.
In that moment, when he decides to save the girl, he says that he's fed up with his helplessness.
Yeah, he says, but then after he's done, you see that he looks at the girl and she suddenly no longer looks like Siri. I don't think he did that out of the good of his heart.
Yeah, it's like something happens to him.
Yeah, again, I don't think that's out of the, kindness of heart or being fed up, really being fed up with stuff. I still think it's more connected to him being fixated on the save Siri mission. This girl looks like Siri. Oh, shit. Well, no longer. Well, cool.
I think Milva also encouraged him
Oh, yeah.
because
Oh,
Milva was going to save her.
Yeah.
look, Milva's been bitching about stuff for a whole chapter, which I think it's a nice tie-in to the next question.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. So our next question, what lesson does Milva imply following the fall of the village to Nilfgaard, Verdun, and the Soyatal? Do you agree or disagree with the sentiment? So I'll read it out here. Look at that village going up in smoke, muttered Milva, and they'd only just finished rebuilding it after the last war. They sweated for 2 years to put up the foundation, and it'll burn down in a few seconds. There's a lesson to be learned. What lesson would that be? Geralt asked brusquely. She didn't answer. What do you guys think about this quote?
I just think it's a very realistic way to look at war.
yeah, but she explains what she meant like a dozen pages later.
Yeah.
I don't remember which one of the boys is like, you can't change it, and she's like, I already did. I did not wait in the hut to get assaulted and stuff. Like I left, I went to the woods, I learned how to use bow and stuff. Like this is her whole point. Whether is that doable for everybody? Absolutely not. Like she's also delusional in her ways, but that's pretty much the whole company that is delusional. So they really fit together very nicely.
I think Milva was forced to harden, because of the circumstances that she lived through.
She wasn't forced. Like, we learned her backstory. She decided to get the hell out because of her stepfather and stuff. Like, she was taught by her father, but she did decide on her own to run away from home to go to Brokilon, which also suicide mission.
She still was forced to flee because she was not treated well by her stepfather.
I think it implies like a hardening for Milva for sure,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because there's a certain element, I think, of maybe optimism is too strong a word, but when you talk about, a war happening and, you spend 2 years putting up foundations and the whole thing burns down in a few seconds, there is a belief in that rebuilding that there may not be a second war or that it's worth living correctly in the meantime, and getting it back to a sense of normalcy in the meantime. And Milva kind of, taunts that, being like, what was the point?
She's too far removed from normalcy for the normalcy
That's true.
to know. I don't think she no longer understands it.
On the other side, like this is, do I admit this on the podcast? I,
Are we
Controversial.
getting this issue?
when I first moved into a studio apartment after spending years living with, a couple years living with roommates, I was just making enough money at the time to be able to afford living there for maybe a year. And so about 4 to 6 months in, I still hadn't bought a bed frame. I was like, well, I'm going to move in a year. There's really no point in buying a bed frame,
Wow.
putting it together, taking it apart in like 6 months, and then having to move again. And then I re-signed the lease 6 or 7 more times.
Yeah.
And just over the course of that, I just never got a freaking bed frame. And like my partner forced me to get like a bed frame and like furnish my new living room in my new place. He's like, if you don't get one now, you're not going to get one.
This is my way of life.
It's kind of a similar sentiment. If I'm planning for, not necessarily disaster, but if I'm planning to move, my actions in the present are going to reflect that future intent.
Yeah.
So I think if you have that intention of we are going to be here, we are going to live well, that's what these peasants believe as they're putting up the foundations of their village. Even if it burns down later, there's still that intention of living well in the present.
Well, it's true in a way. Milva can relate to that sentiment.
Yeah, she lives for the very short term if like every outing she has is running from death.
That's something that she has in common with Geralt, actually.
In what way?
Geralt is a traveler. He doesn't have a home.
Mhm.
So they're kind of the same way in that way.
Yeah, they just have a place to spend winter in, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the subject of, I think, sentiment and agreeing or disagreeing with some of the characters in this chapter, Zoltan has a passage about doing specific good for himself and his immediate circle. He says, "Unbridled altruism is a huge vice of mine. I simply have to do good. I'm a sensible dwarf, however, and I know that I'm unable to do everyone good. Were I to attempt to be good to everyone, to the entire world and to all the creatures living in it, it would be a drop of fresh water in the salt sea. In other words, a wasted effort. Thus, I decided to do a specific good which would not go to waste. I'm good to myself and my immediate circle." Zoltan says this to justify stealing from other peasants in order to feed himself, the company, and the women from Kurnow. So do you agree or disagree with this sentiment?
I kind of agree. At the same time, I disagree
Yeah.
because Sapkowski is reminding us of the lesser evil, kind of. Zoltan is choosing the lesser evil. It's simply something that he has to do, and that's all.
I fully agree with that, with Zoltan. These are words I live by, just with a small addition of not being actively malicious to anyone. Obviously, I'm in better circumstances than Zoltan was. There is nothing wrong about being altruistic to any amount of people, really. It's just I don't have mental or physical capability to do that on a grander scale. So I'm just altruistic towards people I actually, know, spend time with, or at least I'm trying my best to be. Yeah, as I said, without being malicious to anyone else, regardless if I know them or don't know them. These are good words to live by, really.
Yeah. There is something like concrete and measurable about seeing the good work that you're doing within your own circle of course.
Yeah.
Like you can see that it has hopefully a positive effect, and you can reap whatever fulfillment from that. Me personally, I don't agree with even if there's malicious intent towards somebody else. Like I think I personally would prefer to find good that doesn't harm even people I don't know.
Yeah, again, we're not in the circumstances they are, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to talk hypotheticals.
Yeah,
Being
exactly.
a good person in the hypothetical.
Talking from a high horse.
Yes.
There is one of the Polish, I'm going to try to translate it on the spot, but one of the Polish poets, Szymborska, who's a Nobel Prize winner, she said that you only know yourself as much as you've been tested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is actually case in point here, right?
Yeah, that's what a beautiful thing to bring into the conversation. Thanks, Bolo. Like, yeah, I think that's, not only a good sentiment for this chapter, but for the Witcher books and all of the characters in it as a whole, and very nicely surmises the human experience is that you really discover the lengths and the limitations of your character when they are brought into conflict with some sort of external conflict.
I think it's also a general theme with the books. It's that there is no good or bad.
Yes.
It's a very nuanced world, and people are struggling to make the right choices.
I've had many conversations with people reading fantasy, be that from Poland or from elsewhere, who were not fond of it. They were firmly in the camp that there should be good and there should be bad, and Witcher is strictly just shades of gray, no black and white stuff.
Yeah.
So, our last question for our discussion, and to kind of bring, of course, a little lightness to the chapter, Zoltan and his company bring moments of levity, even as the characters experience death and devastation. How do you guys think humor functions within Sapkowski's storytelling?
I think Sapkowski's strength is dialogue,
Yeah.
and the dialogue is just hilarious. Zoltan, in particular, and that part with this whole crew, like his little crew, it has definitely lightened the mood.
Yeah.
Especially when we're marching through like the deaths and all the grim descriptions, and then we get to meet this company. It changes somehow the course of the adventure.
Like we get to know the boys, the Zoltan and the boys, right? When they are singing a song,
Yeah.
they go into a devastated forest, singing a song about a wolf that is happy and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And Jaskier just answers because obviously Jaskier, right?
Can't help himself.
Dandelion.
Sorry.
Dandelion in the books.
It's Jaskier in the books, okay? Like actual Polish name is Jaskier, so.
Yeah, they're singing, they're playing cards.
Yeah, barrel.
Yeah, I don't know which translation you got. Like in Poland, it's called gewint. Guess why there was Gwent's game and all that stuff later on. I vividly remember being 12 and falling off the chair when reading that because it was too funny. Especially since, again, this is lacking on the translation because there's a lot of poop jokes in this part in Poland.
There is a lot of insults. Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
But poop jokes specifically.
Yes, poop jokes specifically when it goes to like licitations.
Yeah.
Because they're the pile and the poop is the same word kupa in Polish.
Okay.
So there's a small kupa or small pile or a small poop, the big kupa. And there's also something that actually says this to be a poop joke, which is placek, which is the other word of saying what the cow is shitting.
Yeah.
And this one is actually setting this as full-on poop joke, which is absolutely totally missing, and which would be between Mala and like small and big poop.
Yeah.
It's That's not the only thing, right? Like the talk about the metallurgy and stuff. Like not only the levity of them being able to have like the sense of humor and joking among themselves, or being obscene and not very well cultured towards the kind of women and children. They stay humane during war.
Yeah.
I think it's a coping mechanism of sorts, which seems to be very good coping mechanism. At least it seems to be working for them. To just go on about the business as much as normal as you can, right? Because obviously you will not be going through the main roads singing when there's partisans or the actual army about. But when you can just go about your day as you might, so you don't get caught up in the negative loops of the absolute dogshit world that is around you.
And I think that's something that Sapkowski does really well, is that balance of, humor and severity and realism.
Yes.
And the humor is still relatively grounded, which makes it all the more fun. And as you said, like, I think it's a really wonderful depiction of, I think, finding still light and humanity despite the circumstances that everybody is in.
I think the sense of companionship gives them that feeling of even Geralt is more comfortable. He's
Yeah.
talking more and he's getting more social with the boys, with Zoltan
Yeah.
and the company.
It's always better to hang out with the boy.
Yeah.
They're not alone anymore.
And I think that blanket of safety and security allows them to be a little bit more social and a little bit more enjoyable.
Yeah.
I think from a literary perspective too, like, it keeps the audience captivated. I think it's a very different type of audience and a very different type of story if the whole thing is grimdark.
Yeah.
I think Sapkowski's, superpower and his mark is keeping all of this engaging and keeping us expecting the unexpected as we're traveling with Geralt in the group. Yeah.
Also, just circling back to what Sophie said at the beginning, like he is very, very good at dialogues,
Yeah.
and he knows it. Like, I'm pretty sure when he's writing the books, he just keeps everything to the minimum and lets the dialogues just carry this. Because you read this, and most of this sound like people actually talking to each other.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
like, Star Wars prequels, I don't like sound, or it's irritating and it's get everywhere. No, like these are people talking. These are two guys talking to each other as if there were guys talking to each other.
Yeah.
It's like not far removed from the reality, even though the word choices might be different. This is how he builds not only the characters, but he builds world like this.
Yeah, that was going to be my point as well. I do feel like 85 to 90% or more of the world building he does is all through dialogue. In one of our previous discussions in chapter 1, we talked about how we're learning all of this stuff about Milva, but through Dijkstra and Ori's conversation, and not just through like random narration about Milva. And I do think that it ends up being really powerful because, as you said, Bolo, these characters are reacting to the content that they're being given, but also they allow us as an audience to glean more about the world and about everybody who's being spoken about. So it's really, really, really masterful writing, and what a wonderful way of getting the audience and the characters involved in the storytelling.
Which is super weird because normally you would say show don't tell.
Yeah.
And this is showing by telling,
Yeah.
which goes against the grain really, because normally you would just drop, a flashback.
Which he does a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he does that a lot.
Flashbacks of dialogues and
Yeah, like it's all over the place.
it's a nesting doll of like methods.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we do learn about Milva from other people's perspective. We don't watch as much of her flashbacking until the Sarge part later on. Dude just decided like I'm gonna do my stuff. I don't care what people are telling that I can or cannot do, and this goes very much in character for him. Anyone who ever listened to the dude speaking will tell you the amount of discussions in my family, because almost everybody already read The Witcher, we had about, do you think that this dude comes up on its own with it, or he just have people like sending him shit, like being like, yo, dude, that's gonna be hilarious here.
I don't know. I think I told this story on the podcast before, but when I had the opportunity to ask Andrzej Sapkowski a question to his face back in 2019, my question was like, the dialogue is so wonderful in The Witcher. Like, how do you come up with it? And he literally sat there for a second. He was like, I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I'm surprised he didn't tell you to fuck off while he was at it.
He probably could have, and I would have been like, great.
Yeah.
I think this chapter really exemplifies some of the best loved qualities of Sapkowski's storytelling and his writing and The Witcher as a whole. Like, it has moments of like true internal conflict and external conflict. We're seeing the war, we're seeing these grays, we're seeing our characters grapple with moral decisions, and we're also like getting a good laugh out of it along the way.
Yeah.
I think the best summary of this chapter is there happens 0 things and you cannot stop reading it.
Yeah. It's 2 hours long.
There is literally nothing that happened. Every time that something starts, it's just like, yeah, well, they getting caught by the hawkers, right? They see Kahir there and don't do anything about it. They go through the forest and don't do anything with it. They sit around and watch a village being defended and taken, and they can't really do much. Next, they go through the forest. They don't do anything about it. They meet Zoltan. They don't do anything about it. They meet that monster. They just scare it away, so they don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the chapter, they finally do something about it. And it turns out it was pointless. So,
But we are along for the ride.
one of the best chapters
Yeah.
in the best book.
Sophie, any last thoughts on this chapter?
We didn't talk about Kahir's parts.
At all,
I
yeah.
thought they were hilarious too. Just the fact that he spared him the first time and he kept following them, and
I want
it's
to join you. No, what I really want.
it was like, excuse me?
Yeah, like reading that first time, that was plot twist and a half.
Yeah, and I think that also like continually speaks to where Geralt is, that he just keeps letting him go.
Yeah, and he keeps coming back.
It's like, I have bigger fish to fry, go away. Kahira is like, nope, I am on this specific journey, I am following you, and you are my father now.
Bro, I'm on the same mission as you. No, you're not. Yes, I am. No, you're not. Yes, I am. Watch me being on the same mission as you are.
I just picture him following them from a distance. It's so funny.
I know, it's like when you go to dinner with people or you go to a bar and then at the end of the night you're all like, okay, bye, and then you just turn to walk the same direction. It's like, okay.
Awkward.
Yeah. I didn't think there was too much to discuss about or like to question about Kihir's role, at least right now, but
It's coming up in next chapter.
Just the fact that he stalked them. Well, he's a stalker at this stage.
yeah, he's very persistent. I mean, I think this chapter overall, like, yeah, there's not much that in theory happens in it,
It's just a setup.
but it is a very enjoyable ride with Geralt, Dandelion, and Milva, and later with Zoltan and his company. I wouldn't trade this camaraderie and the affection that I feel toward these characters for anything.
It's the beginning of this friendship, a very beautiful friendship.
Yeah. And honestly, like I have not read Witcher for a few years now, good few years now.
Mm-hmm.
And dropping into it, like in the middle of a book, in the middle of saga, it was like seeing an old friend.
Yes.
For me at least. Like again, I read this book so many freaking times, but it's just like I read it in English this time first, and I'm like, yeah, I know that this is mistranslated because I remember, like, I know this shit by heart pretty much already. It's like, god damn, this is so nice. This is so fun to just get back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely. And I'm so glad to be on this journey with you guys and just discuss this chapter. That is it for our show today. Bolo, Sophie, thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode. And thank you to our Hansa for listening.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you can find both Bolo and Sophie in the Hansa Discord, and if you ever find yourself in Krakow, Poland, be sure to let Bolo take you out for a beer and for Lodi. Fill yourself up on $1.75 ice cream.
Oh yeah, the ice cream. I knew it.
I rolled onto the plane after Poland. It was phenomenal. Would recommend. And next episode, join us as we continue our discussion with Andrzej Sapkowski's Baptism of Fire, Chapter 3. Thanks for joining us at the breakfast table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and complete list of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastfromauclair.com. Breakfast from Eau Claire is created by Alyssa from Good Morning. It's hosted by Alyssa. The show is edited by Alyssa with music by Alex Berner. Breakfast from Eau Claire is produced by Alyssa in New York City with Katie the Redhead Croissant, Jacob B., Charlotte Klingerberg Glamorai, the original Roach, Libby John Verblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Miriam Tamaria, Softy, Lisa C., and Red Kite. Special thanks to Bolo and Sophie for joining us for this episode and our international Hansa for their support.